when you were little kids? Oh, most of them. Okay. So when you were little kids, did you believe that the Red Sea was parted and the Israelites went through and then it drowned the Pharaoh? How many of you believed that when you were little kids? Okay. How many of you knew that there was actually evidence that actually really, really happened in the world when you were a little kid? No, I didn't know it. I just believed it because the Bible said. Philip knew. Philip, goodness gracious. I'm so glad you're here. Take it away, Philip. All right. Tonight, when you leave here, if you haven't seen this stuff already, you're going to go, it really did happen. It really did happen. All right. Lord bless us. Now, there's resources, and this is all YouTube mostly of good stuff, and you're going to have this to. You can show this to any of your friends. It's shareable on Google Drive. So I just want to let you see there's some good stuff there. All right, applying the blood. Hopefully that black thing will go away. You know that they used hyssop and they put blood on their doors to protect them. And I'm hoping that black bar will go away. Please. Oh.
I'm not aware of how to make that. I've never presented with this software before.
There it goes. Good. Okay. It's not hard to believe that really happened because anybody could do that, right? But what about that? Is that hard to believe? It is for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Sure. All right.
But how could that be contrived?
Fake? No, it just never happened. Just like it's a fairy tale. Most people out there think it's a legend. Most people agree that happened 2,000 years ago. That's a long time ago. But did that really happen? The empty tomb. So Scripture has a lot of strange information about what's coming in the future. So how can you know that that's true if you don't really believe the stuff in the first 5 books actually happened? All right, so we're going to fix that. Jesus said unto him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but by me. And he's saying that to you, and he's saying that to the people that you work with. It's a very bold statement. It's either a lie, he's insane, or it's the truth. It's the truth. He is the only good man that's ever lived. And his death was actually a violation of God's justice. Right? Justice was actually screwed up that day. All righty. Now, we've done a couple of Passovers before for Gentiles in Gentile churches, and they have no context for this Hebrew stuff. So this is the first time we've done it with folks that aren't. So this is what they do, right? And the history of that's hard to compete with, right? I mean, that's good stuff. How do we compete with that? Okay. The Orthodox Church, they do it right. They still paint their eggs blood red. Okay. Do you know why? Why? Exactly. Well, they're a symbol of fertility. It's because of this chick. Her name is not Easter, it's Ishtar. She is the goddess of fertility. And the proper way to adore her is to kill a baby every year and paint eggs with that baby's blood. So they're like that. But if you put a gold cross on them, everything's groovy. Right? Okay. So needless to say, Jewish people think we're all pagans. Right? I mean, we got to break this cycle. So we're going to get started. Especially that guy. Alrighty. 200 years before the Exodus, Joseph predicted the 7 years of famine. And so he built a huge city. And we found that city where the granaries are, and that's in the resources. They're really cool. There's all these different granaries, and they have chutes that drop down into the middle one. So it was very easy for him to store it, and everything was kind of automatic. It's that resource is wonderful. So they had 7 years where they didn't do any work. So they were able to build really crazy stuff because the money was pouring in, And they weren't working the land, so they built up their cities. And that's why Egypt has that little era of greatness. After 200 years, there came a Pharaoh who had no regard for Joseph. He enslaved the people of God, which is what the world does. And still the Jews were being blessed, and they were populating like crazy. And it started to make the Egyptians nervous. So they said, let us deal shrewdly with them so that they may not increase. He commanded that the baby boys be thrown into the Nile as a sacrifice to their gods. Later, and you're going to see the thing of water a lot. So I wanted to include this because we're going to hear the word water like 50 times tonight. If the kids were here, I wanted them to realize that there's a lot of bad stuff that happens in Exodus. And God is really coming down hard on the Egyptians. But you've got to realize that they had become so cruel that it was measure for measure, unfortunately. So we remember the daughter of Pharaoh saving Moses, who was their savior. And 10 things we're going to get into on the 19th of April. Okay, this is Google Earth satellite photo. The Nile River equals green, equals life, equals people. Everything else you don't want to be. Okay? And the Israelites were up there in Goshen, which is still, tons of rice and wheat and cotton. Egyptian cotton is fantastic. 40 miles from the Nile, that's what it looks like.
Wow.
40 miles. That's from here to Sky Harbor. I Googled it. A direct shot, not driving. A direct shot is 40 miles. So that's a satellite photograph of Egypt. The bright dot is Cairo. Again, that's not a pleasant place to live anywhere that's not green. There's a better shot, more recent. There's an Egyptian bull, and that's going to come up quite a bit tonight. Some horns on that dude, huh? Okay, cattle absolutely crucial to ancient times. And they called the bull god Apis. And he was very important to them. And Yahweh killed him. Jehovah killed Apis with pestilence, right? Mm-hmm. One of the plagues. Destroyed their economy. Because they didn't count their money so much in dollar bills or even in gold. They count the feet and divide by 4. And that's how much wealth you had. Okay, the only Egyptian families who didn't suffer loss when the last plague came down, the death of the firstborn, were those who hid in Jewish homes. And they had these 9 previous plagues to realize this God of Israel is the real deal. They heard this was coming down. They went and joined Israelite families, and they survived. Now, the thing is that the firstborn were your professional class, your priests, the people that had more wealth than anybody else. So to lose them was a catastrophe. But then to lose all the others that were soldiers when the water crashed in, that was the end of them. And then the Amalekites took over Egypt for 400 years after. That was a terrible time of chaos for Egypt. They are also called a Hyksos. There's all these different names because each nation named them a different thing in their words. So a lot of Egyptians left Egypt with the Jews. And we're told a mixed multitude also went up with them in very much livestock and flocks and herds, wealth. And the Lord had given the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians so that they let them have whatever they asked. Thus they plundered the Egyptians. And well, funny thing about the sages, when Aaron was doing the golden calf thing, he said, tell your wives to bring me all their jewelry, and then we'll make the golden calf. Like, your wives aren't going to give up their jewelry to make this stupid thing. He thought he was going to get away with it. He said, go get your wife's jewelry, and we'll do this. They gave up their jewelry anyway. So then he was stuck. All right. Salvation has always been of the Jews, just like Jesus said. So we got to get in the home of the Israelites. We Gentiles, our branch has to be securely planted in their trunk. All right, the lamb slain from the foundation of the world. Passover lamb. All right, now I'm going to show you this really happened. Did it really happen? This is in the back of your Bible, if you've got a certain Bible. Shows them going through Sinai, crossing the Red Sea, and then the Sinai Peninsula. It's misnamed. Oh, yeah, Helena, the mother of Constantine, said that this is where Sinai was. So we call the whole peninsula Sinai. It's over in Arabia. So they crossed safely, the waters rolled back and drowned the Egyptian army that was pursuing them. How can you know that really happened? If you do, this guy's going to call you a fool, right? He doesn't believe it. He mocks Christians because we believe in all these fairy tales, right? Faith with reason. All right, here's more Google Earth. This is green where gorillas live and stuff, a long way from Egypt. The Nile actually starts here in Lake Tana in Ethiopia, which is why Moses took an Ethiopian wife, because he had a military campaign down here, and he met an Ethiopian princess and took her back to Egypt as his wife. So that's in the Bible. Not the fact that he was a general, but he was. Okay. It is it?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So you see the delta up there and the big arrow pointing to where Mount Sinai is. This is the land of Goshen. I did this today. This picture's like springtime in Egypt right now. This is what it looks like. That's France. Not as green. Not as green. That's the Nile Delta. That's a good place to live if you're an agricultural person. But everything else is horrible. So when you hear about them grumbling, it's because they left the greenest place I can find on the planet, and they went to, it rains 1/10 of an inch sometimes on Sinai. Some years it doesn't rain at all. But 4 inches is the most, and we get 8 inches on average here in Phoenix, just for your information. So you see that little white dot that the arrow's pointing to? Very important place. It's getting bigger. We're zooming in. So here's Mount Sinai. That's called Nuweiba, which is in Egypt. It's the only flat place on the Red Sea. It is the staging ground for where they crossed the Red Sea. And you can put a lot of people here. We'll zoom in some more. Okay, so it's flat. It's very smooth. And we're going to zoom in on this little square. That's the city of Nuweiba, if you could call it that. We're zooming in. These arrows, these are 18-wheeler trucks in that parking lot. So we're going to zoom back out. This is a desalination plant. So that's Nuweiba. It gives you some perspective. It's a big piece of real estate. You can put a bunch of people there. And the only way to get to it is either from the water or through that dry riverbed called the Wadi Watir. I'm get jazzed about this, so I just love this stuff. Okay, this actually happened. All right, there are 2 pillars. Has any of you guys heard this before? I don't want to. You've heard this? Okay, good. Okay, that pillar is on the Egyptian side of the little town of Nuweiba. It used to be in the water. But when Israel took over the Sinai for a while, back I think in 1982, they found this pillar in the water. And they're like, what is that? They had no idea what it was. And they moved it inland, and they put it on the other side of a little highway. And that pillar it's called a Pillar of Solomon. It's inscribed with the Hebrew words Yahweh, Pharaoh, Mitzrayim, which is Egypt, Moses, death, water, Solomon. But you can't see it on that because it's sat in the water for too long. But on the other side, this is taken in the morning, and that's the shadow of it from space. All right, that's back in the 70s or 80s. On the other side in Saudi Arabia is one that has been there and hasn't been in the water. and you can read all of those inscriptions. But Saudi Arabia doesn't like Jewish stuff, so they dug it up and they took it away. Who knows if they destroyed it or not. But that's the one that's on the east side. Okay, so Solomon wanted you to know that the Lord did part the sea between those 2 points. And they crossed right there. That's about a 12-mile span. Okay. There is an underwater bridge that goes at the deepest point about 800 feet, 800, 900 feet. On the north side is called the Elat Deep, which is 3/4 of a mile down. And on the south side, it's almost a mile deep. And it's rough, and it's full of rocks, and it's treacherous, and it's horrible. But this right here is smooth. Smooth. The Lord said that He made a highway through the path of the sea. And that's in Psalms. It's in Psalms. I don't forgot where it is. But this is the Aragonos Deep, and that's the Elat Deep to the north. They crossed this saddle. That's a 3D image, obviously. Here's another one. You cannot cross through there with wagons and horses and children and stuff, but you can cross there if the water peels back. Another image. This is called Bel Zephron. That's Nueva that we're talking about. That's what Bel Zephron looks like. There's nothing over there, but it's also smooth, and you can also, and then you hit mountains and it gets horrible. So that's looking from Egypt over to Saudi Arabia, and that's from the water looking back at Nueva into the Wadi, which is pretty smooth.
Jimmy, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
What did you say the average depth was as that, that crossing was?
The deepest part is just under 900 feet. It's
That's way deep.
Oh, it's deep. Yeah, but it's a 6-degree angle, which is fairly steep, but it's smooth. It's sand. There's no rocks. No rocks, which is very rare because that's the world's biggest rock garden. And there's no rocks in that one place. So there's the Wadi. There's a little road going down it because that is the only way in. Those mountains, I mean, you're not going over those mountains. So this is from about 5,000 feet altitude above, or maybe it's 15,000 feet. I forget. That's a black and white thermal image there. It is the only flat place that could be a staging ground for crossing over. And you remember, we're told that God put a pillar of fire right there to save them from the Egyptians who were coming to get them. That's where the fire was. Blocked them. I just love all this stuff. Nueva, it means, whatever it means, I can't say it. Waters for the opening of Moses is what it means in Egyptian. Isn't that crazy? All right, Charlton got it right. And he wants you to join the NRA. So, and probably make America great again, too. I'm thinking probably so. So this really happened. But there's more. There's a lot more. We're about a third into the coolness of this. Okay, and the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea upon dry ground, and the waters were a wall unto them on the right hand and on the left. And the Egyptians pursued and went in after them into the midst of the sea. And Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen, and he, which is God, took off their chariot wheels. So it went like that. The wheels popped off in the sand, because the sand is real soft. And Moses stretched forth his hand over the sea, and the waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen, even all the host of Pharaoh that went in after them into the sea. There remained not so much as one of them. So everybody died, including Pharaoh. Right there. Okay. Ron White in 1974. Anybody hear this guy? Yeah. He's a kook and crazy, faithful, godly man who went and found all these things. He looked for Noah's ark, and he went down in the water and he found some artifacts in this saddle underwater in this smooth place between Egypt and Saudi Arabia.
So, as the masses go through, and the Egyptians are right behind them, what's your perception of the time and the distance between the two?
I don't know. I think it
Because
scared them to
water's
death.
coming back to drown them, so it's stopping in the middle. It's not like, okay, the masses are through.
Oh, I think when they got on the other side of the shore, and probably the last Israelite's foot came out of the water, I think the waters fell
at
in.
that time.
Yeah,
And at what length of time do you think?
I think it was scary, because God always scares us. He lets us get scared, right? Oh, another cool thing, when you read the book of Ruth, it talks about a guy named Elimelech, and he was the guy that left Bethlehem and went over to Moab because there was a famine in the land. The sages hold that his great-great-great-great-grandfather was the guy that had enough faith when the waters parted, that he was the first guy to step in to where the water was and tell everybody, come on, let's go. And then they all went. But somebody had to be the first guy to do that. And God blessed him for his faith and made all of his descendants fabulously wealthy. And so the fact that Elimelech had this lineage, this history of being the descendant of this guy, it was heartbreaking and very disturbing for the Israelites when he left Israel and abandoned them. He was a very wealthy guy. He probably could have cured their famine with his money. He split. And of course he died in Moab. So. Uh-oh. All right. So, and God took off their chariot wheels. Yes, he did. There's bones down there. That's a normal femur. That's one that came out of the Red Sea. Not so much as one of them remained. That is a chariot wheel. I mean, that is obviously a coralized chariot wheel. And this wheel and an axle on sitting on a wheel looks like a table. That is not a natural formation. And I love that gold stuff. And there was a little period of time in Egypt when they used both the four-wheel chariot and the more technologically advanced six-wheel chariot, which worked better. And it was during that time that the Exodus happened. And both of those kind of chariot wheels are found in there. That's Ramesses. It was actually a different pharaoh, but he's had a better day. Kind of needs some moisturizing. All right, the question is, will the Lord come through for me when I face terrible circumstances in my life today? That's what it'll look like. It won't be chariots, it'll be modern, but it'll be just as scary sometimes. All right. Faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. But we're only half done. It's going to get better. Okay, because we got to go to Sinai.
Yeah.
All right, so what's the archaeological finding for that? Okay, Bible says that there were 12 wells in the desert for their water supply, and we found 12 oases that are still there in Saudi Arabia, in that area. Now, I wouldn't want to drink from them, but we also find these things. What's that? What does that look like?
Footprints.
It looks like footprints on a rock.
Yeah, they inscribed them to show that they were there.
They inscribed them to show that they were there. We got a ringer over here.
The Lord told us,
Okay.
wherever your foot touches.
Yes. And they wanted to prove we were here. It hardly ever rains there. So 3,500 years ago, Jewish feet were in the Saudi Arabian desert. Hundreds of these things are found. Every place on which the sole of your foot treads shall be yours. Deuteronomy 11. So, I mean, they're all over the place. Because they had nothing to do, right? They're just hanging out. What are we going to do? There's no TV. You know? Yeah, let's draw my foot again, you know? So there's another oasis. And that their little area, that's Nueva. We got to get over here through all this horribleness. No water, driest place in the world, to this little spot here, which is Mount Sinai. How do you know? Because that mountain has been burned. It's black. And the charring and the burn scars remain to this day. Now Mount Sinai was completely in smoke because the Lord descended upon it in fire. Its smoke ascended like the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mountain quaked greatly. Exodus 19. All right, now you see this little white thing at the bottom? Looks like a road? It's not. It's a fence because Saudi Arabia doesn't want you to go find all this Jew stuff. Because we're going to see a bunch of Jew stuff. And that is not, it's not a road. I mean, there's nothing down there. There's no reason for people to be there. So there's the fence a little closer. Every so often there's a little guard shack to keep you out of there. Don't find those feet and other stuff. And I mean, what did this guy do to have to be stuck out there in a little guard shack? He screwed up, you know. I mean, wow, what a tough gig that is. All right, this sign says, archaeological area warning. It is unlawful to trespass. Violators are subject to penalties stipulated in the antiquities regulations, passed by royal decree. Sounds fancy. I bet those regulations include flogging.
Oh,
I bet they do. We love the flogging.
What's significant about that, Jimmy, is
Oh, no.
obviously they don't want the world to know that that land belongs to Israel.
Absolutely. And McAfee wants to scan my computer right now.
Deny the whole incident.
Yeah.
Like the whole-
Isn't it true that this land is our land?
Yes.
Your land?
And if you, I'm going to translate it. I'm going to, what?
You're walking and you're trespassing?
Yes.
I got caught for trespassing.
Uh-oh.
I was walking.
Oh, no.
Ridiculous.
In Saudi Arabia, you get in trouble for that. Now, I'm going to translate the Arabic here, okay, right now. It says, we don't want you to see all the Jew stuff that's here at Mount Sinai because you will come to believe, that the God of Israel is the one true God.
That's a good interpretation.
That's my, you like that one?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. The top of this mountain has been burned. That is not a cloud, because all of these different photographs from the one area that you can get to it show the same angle. Look, that thing has been fried. And you pick up a rock from there, it's black on top, and underneath it's pink and brown. It hasn't been burned. You throw it down on the ground and break it, and the burning is just like 5 or 6 pages thick. That thing has been burned. That's Elijah's cave, we believe, because he's had a cave in Horeb. And not much of a cave. I mean, look what we've done with the place. But it would keep you out of the sun.
Yeah.
It'd be horrible to live there. So these are the jagged rocks on top of Sinai. Near the floor of the valley below. What's that about, huh? That's crazy. That's a weird rock. All right. But the people thirsted there for water, and the people grumbled against Moses and said, why did you bring us up out of Egypt, where it's so green, right? To kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst. So Moses cried out to the Lord, what shall I do with this people? They're almost ready to stone me. And the Lord said to Moses, pass on before the people, take with you some of the elders of Israel, and take in your hand the staff with which you struck the Nile, with which you split the Nile, and go. Behold, I will stand before you there on the rock at Horeb, which means sword, right? It's another name for Sinai. And you will strike the rock, and water will come out of it, and people will drink. And Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. Okay, so more water, right? That is very unusual. All right, this is looking at it from a distance. Notice those aren't jagged rocks; those are smooth rocks. They have been eroded with water. There's no sand there. It's just big rocks. All the sand and all the little rocks have been blown out by water. I don't know if you can see that very well, but those are smooth, water-eroded stones in the desert where some years it doesn't rain at all. The cleft of the rock. Would somebody read Exodus 33? Please. I'm going to get sick of hearing my voice. I'm good, thanks. Thank you.
Exodus 33.
12 through 23. To 23, I guess.
to 23. It says, "And Moshe said to Yehovah, Behold, you are saying to me, bring up this people, but you have not made known to me whom you would send with me." Am I on the right place?
Yeah.
Okay. "Though you have said, I know you by name, and you have also found favor in my eyes. And now please, if I have found favor in your eyes, please show me your way, and let me know you, so that I find favor in your eyes. And consider that this nation is your people." And he said, "My presence does go with you, and I shall give you rest." And he said to him, "If your presence is not going, do not lead us up from here. For how then shall it be known that I have found favor in your eyes, I and your people, except you go with us? Then we shall be distinguished, I and your people, from all the people who are upon the face of the earth." And Yehovah said to Moshe, "Even this word you have spoken I shall do, for you have found favor in my eyes, and I know you by name." Then he said, "Please show me your esteem, your glory." And he said, "I shall cause all my goodness to pass before you, and I shall proclaim the name of Yehovah before you, and I shall favor him whom I favor, and I shall have compassion on him whom I have compassion." But he said, "You are unable to see my face, for no man does see me and live." And Yehovah said, "Behold, there is a place with me, and you shall stand on the rock. And it shall be, while my glory passes by, that I shall put you in the cleft of the rock, and cover you with my hand while I pass by. Then I shall take away my hand, and you shall see my back, but my face shall not be seen."
Cool. That's good stuff. I will put you in the cleft of the rock. I think that's probably a good guess for being the right one, because it's right there at the base of Sinai. And underneath it is a dry lake bed. It wasn't a trickle of water. It was a gushing geyser of water. And this pile of smooth stones looks like a big mess, right? Those are pretty much the only pile of smooth stones you're going to find in that whole desert. They have been, looks like pebbles in a creek, right? And this is what's on them. Turns out it was where the altar for the golden calf was. What are these drawings? This little Asian guy, he was the doctor to a Saudi prince, and so he got permission to go and have these photographs taken. But that's about it.
Where did you find them?
Online.
So they can be accessed.
Yeah, the resources are at the right at the beginning, so you'll be able to see it. This is that Egyptian bull Apis again, and there's 12 of these, maybe one for each of the tribes. There's 12 of those bulls surrounding this golden calf altar. What's an Egyptian bull doing in Saudi Arabia? Because the Saudi Arabians, back then, they drew big fat bulls that were real round. That's from a tomb in Egypt. That's as good as they could do. And that's what you do when you're doing graffiti in the desert.
Like beef cutlets.
Now this guy, what's he pointing to? Can you see what that is? It's a menorah, Jew stuff. And I'm sorry that granulation is bad on that photograph, but he's pointing to a menorah in Sinai, in Saudi Arabia. All right. And there's corrals, which is where because they stayed there a while, about a year, I think. And so they built corrals to hold their livestock. And these were right by that altar, where they shouldn't have been doing what they were doing, right? We're almost done. These are some artifacts. Not many have been found because you can't go there. The Saudi Arabian government will not let you. These have been snuck out, and some of them are still intact.
What are we looking at?
Pots, mostly pots. This is a grinding stone with a mortar and pestle, basically, for making flour, or grinding manna, right? Because they had probably had 1,000 recipes for manna. All right.
What's on the menu? Oh, man.
How long did they have to eat
Faith and reason. Okay. So this is stuff to build your faith. It doesn't have to be a blind faith. So that way you know he is not here. He's risen as he has said. So the God that tells us what's up can be trusted. Even if it sounds crazy, like the seas splitting and getting saved and all of that. All right, so I'm done. That was fun. Oh, I love that. Thank you.
That's fantastic, Jimmy. Thank you so much. Rather than get you up, I'm just going to sit on your lap if you don't mind.
Okay. I don't think that's going to work.
I'm kidding.
There's no room at the end.
No, that's fantastic. I appreciate you guys you sharing that, Jimmy. And I know that some of you have seen that, and if you haven't, I encourage you to look into that. There are probably 3 or 4 of them now online where you can go and watch a mini documentary, something like that, regarding Ron Wyatt and Jim and Penny Caldwell. Michael Rood has taken some of that information and extrapolated it into a nice presentation with a lot of production value. I saw that years ago, and it stunned me and amazed me. Frankly, it was just flabbergasting to see that truth of that, and I was just delighted.
There was a few years ago a documentary that was aired in theaters called Patterns of Evidence, The Exodus, by
Yes.
Michael Mahoney. I believe it's Michael.
Yes.
And
Isn't that on Netflix?
Tim. Isn't it Tim?
Or Tim Mahoney, yes.
He just in the last 2 weeks released another one that aired at the theaters, limited release, and that one was Patterns of Exodus, the Moses conspiracy.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
it was. And he said in the end of that he's going to, the next one is going to be specifically about the
nice.
parting of the Red Sea.
Nice. Well, his previous documentary, Patterns of Evidence, I believe it's on Netflix. That's where I saw it. Yeah, that first one is about the Egyptian timeline. There's some fascinating stuff in there. I thought it was quite well done. So if you look at that, Patterns of Evidence, I think it's still on Netflix. At least I hope so. It's a very good documentary. Angela?
What's this session?
What's that?
Tim Mahoney.
Tim Mahoney
From
is the director.
Minneapolis,
Yeah.
I'm not a-
Tim Mahoney.
Angela, I apologize.
As he was presenting, I was thinking about some stuff because this Exodus story is so important. I mean, we're supposed to remember it, and the thing about patterns, and I just love the patterns, and I think that patterns can help us understand. And he said this is the
Historicity.
of the Exodus.
Yes.
Okay, and I would propose to you, and keep this in mind as you're reading about other things, about the bigger picture, that this was given to us for understanding in that bigger, because I'm seeing the historicity of humanity's restoration. If you look at the whole story, on the second day, he parted the waters. He created a space between the upper and lower waters for us to be, for us to pass through on our way to the mountain.
Ooh, baby.
And then he destroyed the enemy with water, like a flood. But that wasn't the end of the story. Because then we went to dry land and we wandered and we drank water from a pierced rock. And then he descended on the mountain with fire this time instead of water. And then he has his servant named Yeshua lead his people into the land, the kingdom to conquer. And so when you're looking at prophecy and all this stuff,
Through the Jordan River.
through the Jordan River. So this is all, I think those pieces in this story is given to us so that maybe we can understand some of the pieces that are confusing to us, especially the pieces that haven't happened yet. Look at history and see what happened before. And what makes me suspect that this Exodus thing is so critical to the big picture is Moses lived for 120 years exactly. And you remember when he said, my spirit will contend with man for 120 years? And we talked before about that being 120 jubilees, 6,000 years, he will contend with man. And Moses' life is divided into first 40, he was in Egypt, constriction. He looked like an Egyptian. The second 40, he was a shepherd. And the third 40, he was in the wilderness with the people. And then died before the moon. So when you're looking at prophecy and things like that, look to the Exodus and see the details. What happened in the wilderness? When did they complain? What happened to Korah? All these things, all these stories are written down by God to help you understand more than just that as a story.
And I would remind you, thank you, that Paul specifically stated that. If you believe that Paul wrote the book of Hebrews. That
Learn the Bible.
it says that these things were written for our instruction upon whom the end of the age have come.
Wow.
So that's, Paul tells us exactly the same thing. And I hate to bring this down to the mundane. Did you notice how gorgeous my wife is?
Oh, she's so pretty.
I know. Thank you so
She
much.
is.
Fluffy.
Sorry.
Yeah, off she goes.
She disappeared.
Off she goes.
I know. Anyway, no, she's hiding. Look at her. What a cutie. Anyway, that was a very insightful, Angela. Thank you. I know you can hear me.
She's a mystic.
That's right.
Oh.
So I wanted to just show you a couple. Look at you cutie. She's hiding.
The cute mystic. That should be your blog. The cute mystic.
Yeah.
Well,
So I wanted to just spend a couple of minutes going over some of the practicalities of observing this Passover. So you know that it's coming up in a few weeks. It's not very long from now. It's just about 20 days or so. But what we'll do is we need to be aware of some of the practical, needful observances that we'll have. Now we know that leading up to the actual evening of the Passover, which is the 19th, we have some instructions at the very last, which is the day of the 19th. That would be Friday during the day, in which we have some task ahead of us. What is that? What is the task that we all must do in our homes by the very end of the day on the 19th? You got to get the leaven out, and I take that to be practical, real advice. This is my own perspective is this is not something that you spiritualize, and you say, well, that's a metaphor for removing sin from your life. It works beautifully as a spiritual metaphor, but I think it also
true.
has some practical value, which basically says, yes, let's actually remove the leaven from our homes. Now, I know that it says in the Torah that there shall be no leaven found within your borders. Okay? Now, I don't know how to interpret that exactly, and the rabbis will have a ton of opinions regarding that. Let me tell you what it means for me. I take the leaven from my home and I place it in boxes in my garage. Some Jews will take boxes of foodstuffs that are, will last for a long time, and they'll put it in boxes and they'll give it to a Gentile who lives next door. That's all good. Just remove it from your home and don't eat it. That's my opinion. That's my interpretation of the commandment. This is between you and God and your scriptures to decide how you're going to do this, okay? That's just what I'm saying. Angela.
Just the process of reading labels and going through your stuff every year. I learned a spiritual lesson doing the physical deed every year. And one of them was one year, a couple years ago, he told me to remove the leaven from my house, not yours.
Yes, good point.
So for me to sit there and tell you what, that's big. For me to sit there and tell you what I think qualifies as leaven for your house is not what he told me to do.
Yeah.
And there, every year there's something like that. That one year I thought that autolyzed yeast, or one of the things I thought was counted as leaven. Found out the next year it didn't. And there are some things you think are sin, but if you look in the Bible, it's not what you thought it was. It's not in there. And so there's a spiritual lesson every year just from reading through these labels and getting rid of food in my pantry. So the physical act is beneficial, even if you think it's selfish.
The physical act is beneficial spiritually. And I think there's a reason why God gives us these physical, mundane tasks to perform, which can be spiritualized beautifully. But we are creatures of flesh with eyes. God knows how important it is to be able to see and taste and touch and experience things because we are flesh. But we are needing to spiritualize things. And so it's important for us to literally get into the commandments of God and do them. And don't just spiritualize them. That's my own interpretation. However that applies to you, make it apply to you. Okay? So like I said, I love what Angela said. It's not for me to tell you what's leaven in your house. That's for you to figure out. Okay? Now, another practical consideration for Passover is that on the evening leading into the evening, Friday evening, we'll be observing our Passover here together. And we'll be fellowshipping together and eating a wonderful meal and having a good time. And I encourage you to, it literally says to eat the Passover and observe the Passover with your shoes on your feet and your staff in your hand and your go bag ready. Because I personally believe, this is a theory, totally, that there's another Exodus coming. What that looks like, I don't know. There's a lot of theories out there. But I think the Exodus from Egypt is a fantastic example for us because I think it's coming again. I don't know what that looks like exactly, but I know that there is a second Exodus. There's so many, even scriptural references in the prophets who talk about, in those days, I will rescue my people from all nations. Not just one group of people from one nation relocating them to another, but I'll draw my people from everywhere. Now you might say, well, that's the spiritualization, that's the rapture. Possibly, very possibly, but I think it's also more mundane, something to think about. That you preserving this institution that God has instructed us to do is preparing you in so many more ways than you realize when you physically observe it. And so as that evening is passing into the next day, we'll be observing the Passover. And you know that first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, that 7-day period, we will not eat any leavened food for 7 days. Okay? Now, I love to eat matzah on those days. I make my eggs and I put them on matzah. Cream cheese, strawberry cream cheese on matzah is fabulous. Sandwiches made with matzah is really good. Love it.
They keep
So-
your broom handy.
Yeah.
Yes, it's very crumbly and it makes a mess.
It gets really crummy.
Yes, it does. It makes lots of crumbs, but it's quite tasty. Now, I that's what I do. Okay, so in the box of matzah from the store is cheap. It's really not that expensive. Costco's got a huge box.
Streets lightly salted.
That's right.
Streets lightly salted is the proper matzah.
That's right. Now,
Nutritional too.
yeah. Now, some people in this fellowship have actually made their own homemade matzah before. And I'll tell you that fresh homemade matzah is a bit different than the stuff that you get in a box. Now, the stuff you get in a box is not like a cracker, but it's kind of like that. But homemade matzah is a little different. But it's kind of cool. And if you feel like trying it, you should try that sometime. It's pretty cool. But, so that first day and the 7th day are what? Those are a high Shabbat. A high Shabbat. So those are Sabbath days. That is in addition to the weekly Sabbath. So there will be some additional days off. Now, the way that this is falling out is that the first day of unleavened bread for our Passover is what day? It's the same day as our normal Sabbath day. But then what will be the 7th day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread? That would be 7 days later.
It's another Sabbath.
It's another Sabbath. So this year, there is not an additional intermediate Sabbath. A lot of times there is, but this year it's falling out on 2 Sabbath days that are already Sabbath days. So while they are regular Sabbath days, they will technically be considered high Shabbat, high Shabbatot. Okay? So
And the odds of that are like 50 million to 1, right?
It's fairly rare, and it's also fairly
1 in 7.
it's also fairly rare that, interestingly enough, this year the Passover is happening at the same time as the regular Gentile Christian church is celebrating Easter. It's the same thing. Their Good Friday is our Passover, and the Resurrection Sunday, the Feast of First Fruits.
Yeah.
That is the Yom HaBikurim, which is the Feast of First Fruits that is happening that Sunday, is Easter Sunday for them. And that's Resurrection Sunday, or Yom HaBikurim for us, which is, it's a little different, as Jimmy has pointed out. It's a little different. But, and some people often ask me, well, what does a Sabbath observance look like for you? And I'm always hesitant and reluctant to discuss how I observe the Sabbath day, because there's a ton of regulations out there. If you look into Jewish sources, there are thousands of regulations regarding what you can and cannot do on a Sabbath day. I think, to me, there's a base level that you can find written in your scriptures, if you care to look, that's just as clear as you want to make it. And that is, whatever you do to make money, don't do it on that day. That's about as basic as it gets. If you could just, and this is just me telling you what my observance is, okay? Don't hear me telling you this is how you should observe the Sabbath. This is between you and the Lord and your scriptures. So look into it, because that's what it says plainly to me. Whatever you're doing to make money, don't do it on that day. And I would take it, for me, one step further, and I think that there's biblical support for this as well, which is, don't pay people to serve you. Don't, because it says don't make your servants work. Don't even make your animals work on the Shabbat. So how do I interpret that for myself? Well, I'm not going to go and make purchases, because somebody is going to have to take my money. And some people will say, well, what about buying stuff online? It's all digital. That's when you get into some crazy gray areas, which frankly I don't care to touch on. I don't. I don't. If my son says, Dad, I want to watch a movie, and it's something that I have to purchase on Amazon, I'm like, well, wait till the sun goes down. So, you know what? I just don't make even electronic purchases on the Shabbat. I certainly don't go out to eat, because I like to tip my waitresses. I don't want to make them work for free. And I don't want to exchange money on the Shabbat. You can see plenty of examples of that in the scriptures, especially in the books of Nehemiah and Ezra. So that's how I observe the Shabbat. And I encourage you to consider it. I think there's a tremendous blessing for observing the Shabbat. Some people don't like to leave their house. They just stay home. I think that's a fine idea. You can also go and visit with some other friends. There are no, if you want to get rabbinic and you say, well, what's a Sabbath day's journey? Well, according to the rabbis, a Sabbath day's journey is like 1,000 yards outside of the city walls. Do you know how far this city spreads? You can travel from here to Tucson if you want and stay within the city limits. So you can go and visit your friends. You can fellowship with others. You can go to a fellowship. That's what you should do. So that's the way that I observe the Shabbat. And
I'd like to come back next coming for the Holy Sabbath, maybe.
Yes.
And we could get together again.
Sounds delightful to me.
Okay.
I'm delighted. Thank you.
Okay. I'd like to come again because the session helps me relieve my symptoms.
Good.
Because when I'm in pathway, it's misery. People are throwing chairs, they're yelling at each other. It's not fun.
No, I would say not. That does not sound like
I get
fun.
lost in blind.
That's right.
Show me to my room. I know all about it.
So there you have some practical considerations for this holy day. We have technically three of the 7 biblical moedim in Hebrew happening just consecutively, bam, bam, bam. You got the Passover observance, you got the Feast of Matzah, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the observance of unleavened bread, and Yom HaBikurim. 3 right there, bam, bam, bam. It's an important time of the year. important time of the year. It talks about refreshing life, coming back from the dead, from winter. I mean, even nature shows you this stuff. So it's absolutely fascinating. And I like very much to read the book of Exodus, to read it with my kids, talk about it, watch. I love watching the Ten Commandments at this time of year. I do. That's just what I like to do. So, are there any questions, comments, or concerns regarding what we're doing now?